So George went, obviously Norm Peterson from Cheers, he passed recently, and it really got us thinking about what made that character Norm just so iconic.
Absolutely. Especially when you think about, well, how sitcoms often portray the big guy. you know,
Totally. Like, it's usually the lazy one or kind of inept, maybe even a bit of a villain sometimes.
Yeah.
You think Newman or Chief Wiggum.
Jerry Gergich, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But Norm felt different. He was sort of an antidote to all that.
That's a great way to put it. And that's really what we want to get into in this deep dive. It's not just remembering him, but figuring out that unique mix that made Norm work so well as a supporting character.
And George Wendt's talent in playing him, obviously.
Yeah.
We've been digging into some articles about it all. Okay, so maybe start at the beginning. How did Norm even, happen?
Well, it's kind of a classic story, actually. Wendt's agent apparently pitched this role, and it was tiny, like one line.
Just one line?
Yeah, the word beer, that was it initially. Wendt even joked, apparently, that he didn't think he looked like the guy who wanted a beer.
Huh. Funny how things turn out.
Right, because obviously it evolved. It became this character who, as One Piece put it, just never left the bar. He became part of the furniture in the best way.
And Wendt himself felt really close to Norm, didn't he?
He did. He apparently said it was, hard to talk about Norm objectively because he felt so connected.
Wow. That kind of connection, you have to think, that came across on screen made him feel real.
Definitely. That empathy, that understanding from the actor, it must have informed the whole performance.
Yeah. And you think about, the Norm shout when he walked in.
Oh, iconic.
Everyone yelling his name, and he'd always have, the perfect comeback line, usually making fun of himself, his weight or whatever, but never felt mean.
No, exactly. That's a key point one source made. He was a big guy to laugh with, not at.
Yes. That warmth, that sort of lovable, wise-ass thing he had.
Totally. And, the industry noticed, right? 6 Emmy nominations consecutively.
That's huge for a supporting role like that.
It really is.
It's also interesting, one article mentioned how middle-aged men really identified with him, even though Wendt was actually pretty young when Cheers started.
Yeah, he was, early 30s?
Something like that. But Norm just felt like he'd seen a few things, carried some weight, literally and figuratively.
And maybe that's part of the appeal. His struggles, while funny, felt kind of universal, maybe? Even though, as Wendt herself apparently said, Norm wasn't really anything specific.
What do you mean?
Well, he wasn't defined by one big job or one big personality trait beyond being funny. Wendt thought that lack of definition actually helped make him likable.
Huh. So the humor was kind of everything. His way of dealing with, the marriage stuff, the bad jobs he always seemed to have.
Yeah, seems like it. That and the beer, obviously. It was his coping mechanism, played for laughs.
It felt relatable, that kind of escapism.
Exactly. Sitcoms back then often had these broadly drawn characters, but Norm, while fitting the barfly type, had this wit and maybe a little vulnerability underneath.
Right, which stopped him from just being a caricature.
The humor let you see your own frustrations, maybe, but in a lighter way.
Okay, let's shift a bit.
Yeah.
Talk about George Wendt himself. Chicago guy.
Yeah. Deep Chicago roots. And his start in showbiz is pretty great, literally sweeping floors at Second City.
You can't make that up. That's like the launching pad for so many comedy legends.
It really is. And that whole Chicago improv scene, it's crucial. He didn't just sweep. He took classes, got involved, eventually performed there.
So he learned the craft from the ground up.
Yeah, that environment, it teaches you timing, character work, how to read an audience. You can see how that would feed into playing someone like Norm.
And he wasn't an overnight success either. Before Cheers, he did bits on some big shows, right?
Yeah. Little roles on Taxi, Soap, even MAH.
So he was putting in the work, paying his dues.
Definitely. Those smaller parts, even if they weren't flashy, they'd teach you the ropes of TV, how to hit your marks, timing for the camera. It was a buildup.
But then, wow, that Chicago background comes roaring back with Saturday Night Live.
Oh, absolutely. Bob Swirsky. Da Bears.
Just as iconic as Norm for a lot of people, I'd say.
Easily. And what's great is, Wendt said those superfans characters, they were based on guys he actually knew in Chicago.
Really, these super passionate, maybe slightly over-the-top sports guys.
Exactly. He knew that type. He even told a story about how Mike Myers was in the sketch.
The Canadian.
Right. And how Myers was the one they found, quote, unbelievable. Because the others were just like, guys Wendt knew. It speaks to the authenticity in a weird way.
And they took it seriously, that halftime show story.
Yeah.
At the Bears playoff game. with Chris Farley and Robert Smigel.
Legendary.
The article mentioned Went actually headbutted Farley. Like, no helmet.
That's commitment. Peak superfans energy right there.
Yeah.
And Wynn played Swirsky for ages, didn't he? On different shows, commercials.
Yeah, decades. That character had legs. Especially in Chicago, you gotta imagine.
Oh, for sure.
It's kind of sad reading about the Superfans movie, though. The script they had.
Yeah, that got shelved after Chris Farley died. Wynn sounded pretty sad about it.
You can understand why. Losing Farley, that must have just changed everything for that project.
Absolutely. Comedy chemistry is so important. And losing someone like Farley, both personally and creatively, that's a huge blow.
Still, beyond Norman Swirsky, Wen had a really interesting career, didn't he? Lots of different roles.
He really did. Popped up in movies like Fletch, Outside Providence. Some more serious stuff, too, like on The Larry Sanders Show or even Portlandia.
Oh, yeah. And wasn't he in a Michael Jackson video? Like, really briefly.
Black or White. Yeah, the dad at the beginning getting blasted out of the house.
Ah, that's right. It shows his range, though. He wasn't just the funny guy from the bar.
Not at all. He could inhabit different kinds of roles, which really underlines his talent as an actor, beyond those huge comedic characters.
And it says something that he kept coming back to Norm, too, like guest spots on The Simpsons, Family Guy.
Frasier, too, the Cheers spinoff.
Right. It seems like you really liked the character, and knew how much audiences connected with him.
Yeah, embracing that legacy. He seemed happy to step back into Norm's shoes now and then.
There's this great little story early in Cheers. Someone asked him, how many people told him they knew a guy just like Norm?
Okay.
And he apparently just deadpanned 723.
That's perfect. Because it's true, isn't it?
Totally. Everyone felt like they knew a Norm. Maybe not exactly him, but someone like him.
Someone who's maybe a bit down on their luck, kind of set in their ways, but ultimately just familiar, comfortable, brings a certain vibe to the local spot.
Yeah. He made Cheers feel like a real place you could belong, even with all his, flaws.
And maybe that's why, like we said, nobody ever really wanted him to leave the bar.
So, when you boil it down, looking back at George Wendt and Norm, it's just a fascinating example. He took what could have been a pretty flat sitcom character.
The overweight barfly.
And just gave him so much warmth and wit and this relatability.
And the humor, crucially, was directed inwards, mostly. Self-deprecating, so you felt okay laughing along.
Right. You laughed with him. And Wendt's timing, his whole persona, that was the magic ingredient, wasn't it?
No doubt about it. Which actually brings up something interesting for you, the listener, to think about.
Okay.
Consider the supporting characters, not just in TV or movies, but maybe in books you've read, or even, people on the edges of your own life. Who were those figures who, maybe like Norm, aren't the main focus, but they have this unexpected depth, or just this ability to bring some joy or perspective?
Yeah. What makes those seemingly minor players stick with you? Why are they so memorable?
Exactly. Just something to mull over. You might be surprised who comes to mind.